I'm Rob Shearer, and this is the Mighty Good Podcast. Today we're sitting down with our friends from CoSpero Consulting, Harold Hogue and Lauren Coppedge, two of the smartest people that I know in the social impact space. I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say. Harold, what keeps you up at night? Not so much with worry, but more with purpose.
With purpose. I spend a lot of time when I feel challenged, thinking about and reflecting on my great-grandparents and my grandparents. So my great-grandfather had was one of the first Black-owned franchise gas stations in Detroit, right? Indiana. And so after he got out of the military, he opened that and ran it pretty much until he retired. And I think about all the obstacles that he had to overcome in that generation after, fighting in World War II, owning a business, right? And I think about my grandfather who opened a first luxury suit shop in Detroit, Michigan, third grade education. Banks still at his generation weren't lending to Black-owned businesses. And my grandmother, who started a business in her 50s and became a multi-million-dollar healthcare organization that employed family and friends and gave folks, an opportunity. And so when I find a lot of purpose in, if they can overcome what they had to overcome in the generation in which they were doing what they were doing, certainly, right, there is hope for the change that we're trying to make and what we're trying to create in the world today. They had to overcome barriers I couldn't even imagine. So I think about them a lot to reground me and renew sort of my purpose and commitment to what we're trying to create at CoSpero.
That makes us seem like sissies, doesn't it? Like how easy our life is, really.
Yeah. To them, for sure.
Your family was badasses, both of them.
They were.
So you guys are a for-profit consulting firm, but do you think of yourselves as an impact organization?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's the hardest part is we spend a lot of time as a consulting firm thinking as much about measuring our impacts on communities we are connected to, probably as our clients. And I think that speaks a lot about our heart in the work. But we are always retracing our steps, going back to our clients, asking, did you implement that? How was this concept that we developed? Is that program still running? Did it scale up? Did it scale down? We are truly for profit for good. And we actually don't see just the handoff of our work at the end being sort of the end of the story. We really want to know what that longitudinal impact of our work and strategy actually was. And that makes us a lot different than some other firms.
Yeah. There's other firms like ours that are structured as nonprofits, but we made the decision, it didn't make sense to us to essentially compete with our clients for the same pool of funding. Mm-hmm. So it's a unique structure, but intentionally we didn't want to compete for the same dollars.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Lauren, what do you think is the hardest truth about making a real impact that isn't talked about among your clients or other folks in the nonprofit world?
Harold might have a different thought, but I think it's a hard truth for leaders who are in this work moving so fast every day that sometimes you have to slow down a little bit to make big changes, especially. And sometimes you really should slow down and not make big changes without taking the space and time to get the right information and to think things through. But slowing down is really hard, and it's not really funded or resourced to step back or to pause, to slow. And that doesn't mean go slow forever. I think we should push again, but sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. And that can be really hard.
Harold, we've talked a little bit about focus. Can you talk a little bit about the challenge that you think nonprofit leaders have when it comes to focus and maybe saying no to some things or things say yes to other things?
Yeah, I think that where their funding sources are structured, it sort of incentivizes, doing different programs or maybe kind of, they call it mission creep, like stepping over the line. Hey, we don't really do this, but we could because there's a grant out there for it or so on and so forth. And so I think there's this fear amongst some nonprofit clients that, well, if we aren't being able to do all of these things, we might not be able to reach all of these funders or all of these different revenue streams. When in reality, there's an incredible story to be told about doing one or two things incredibly well, better than anybody else, finding all the resources you can think of to invest in that. And that means so much more from community than doing, 5 to 6 different programs, average or slightly, less than average, right? But doing 1 or 2 things incredibly well. I mean, that is how we get, I think that bigger shifts that we want to see, in our communities. But again, it's not incentivized that way. So folks are scared to take that risk, to focus. It is a decision to slow down and focus. Yeah.
We have to do it in business too. I mean, we have to say no to things, and it's hard. It's scary to say no to things that could bring revenue in, but we have to know what we're really good at, what the greatest value we can offer. Nonprofits should have the benefit of doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm. What is a conversation that Dallas isn't having but needs to?
Dallas is an incredible philanthropic city. I mean, we get to do work nationally across the country, and there are truly very few places that have the wealth and the philanthropic infrastructure that we have in Dallas. But I think the hard truth that we're not talking about is that is still the way funding goes in our city is still, in my opinion, incredibly inequitable. We still have a handful of organizations who, essentially have the majority of the resources. To be quite frank, that might be like kind of far removed from community. And we're not having the conversation because everybody feels like, oh, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to risk, the little piece of the pie that I actually have. But if we're going to talk about equity and equitable services and equitable outcomes for kids and all these things that a lot of organizations are pushing for, I think we also got to talk about equity and who gets to hold the purse, and why they get to hold the purse. And if our philanthropic sort of investments are going to mirror, right, some of the inequitable systems we're working to change, I think that's a conversation we should really open up. And it doesn't mean make anybody bad. It doesn't make nobody has to be, to blame for this. I just think it's like, can we address it and name the elephant in the room that there are so many incredible organizations that truly are working on a shoestring budget, and there are other organizations that are many, many literal miles away and many, many like social miles away, if you will, from actually impacting community. And all of that work is needed, but I think we got to think about how we distribute the funds differently. And that's a big, bold, brave conversation that takes some courage.
That probably needs to start at the top. People without the resources are always going to have a hard time starting that conversation. We shouldn't put that on them anyway.
Yeah, there's a power imbalance there.
Power imbalance. And people with the power should interrogate that power and be really transparent and humble about what it means that they have that level of power in the system. And it's not just about the resources. I don't think it's what that resource means, like who's really expected to do the work at the end of the day, like the real work on the ground, the emotional work, like who's really doing that, not just in the funding resources, but really have what they need to carry the weight of making change happen.
Right.
I think people underestimate sometimes how the priorities for social impact really starts with who's writing the check or who's making decisions about where that money is flowing.
Yeah. To the point about focus, right? It's like if there's energy around this particular topic, you always see the nonprofit sector just kind of swing towards that, right? We're doing literacy and now we're economic mobility and now we're workforce. I mean, the pendulum just swings based on who's writing the check. And yeah, I'm sure there's probably data and all kinds of things that are driving that. But when that happens, you start to see nonprofits trying to shift their language, trying to change their programming, when in reality, like, you run an awesome reading program. Like, let's keep investing in that reading program. Don't think you got to go build a workforce development program, right? But when the structure incentivizes that, it just kind of keeps it a little bit chaotic sometimes, it feels like.
I think it's interesting in Dallas to see you've got national money that will flow into local intermediaries, and then local intermediaries that put their own kind of priority or spin on it, and then it goes to kind of last mile delivery orgs. And
right. And then to Lauren's point, like, in that journey map, who's doing the heaviest lifting?
I'm being asked.
Who's being asked to do the heaviest lifting, right?
All these requirements and do all this reporting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of impact reports that I see that I know that those orgs are not actually doing that work that they're measuring.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing addition, right? We're doing a lot of addition, and there's some cool things happening in Dallas, but there are, quite a few well-resourced organizations that truly are doing addition, but that work is being done, by folks on the ground.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What makes you optimistic about Dallas right now?
As a transplant to Dallas, but I've been here for a long time, so I'm a Dallasite now. I've always been optimistic about Dallas. I bring a different perspective of cities that haven't been able to move as quickly as Dallas. And Dallas is a big city. I'm always shocked by how much change has happened since I've been here for 14 years. Just there's leaders, there's resources. People want to make change here, and change happens here like fast for such a big place. And I think that's still true, and even more true now, that there's leaders in the right seats that just have the right mindset, that bring a community perspective to some places like the Dallas ISD School Board. I mean, they have transformed since I moved here. It's amazing, just incredible leaders that are there. And that's just one organization, but they have a big influence in this city. As a parent of kids in Dallas ISD, I'm so thankful for that leadership. And the city council starting to transform. If we can have both of those local leaders like on the same page, moving the same direction, working together, I think that's huge. And then the business community, I've seen more and more recently. They've always been engaged, but I think even more thinking critically about what that looks like and having this public-private partnership. Mm-hmm. I think Dallas can lead the way in that.
Mm-hmm. And they are. I mean, we hear folks all the time. I think we've benefited from just being in Dallas. I think there's been projects folks have invited us to just because they saw we were connected to a project in Dallas. Dallas truly, like when you're immersed in it, right? We can talk about the challenges all day long, but when you pick your head up and we talk to folks in Chicago and DC and other places, they want to know how are we doing some of the things that we're doing. We truly are leading the country, I think, in social impact, innovation. We should be incredibly proud. Nothing's perfect, but for this city to be this size with this complex of issues, mm-hmm. We have pulled off and are pulling off some pretty incredible progress. And it's nationally recognized. People see it.
Yeah. What has been one of the more unexpected learnings? I know CoSpero celebrated 5 years this year. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
What has been one of the more unexpected learnings that you guys have gained in that time period?
I'm curious about yours. Mine that I'm still learning every day. So I thought this job was going to be talking about strategy and resources and community, and it is. But it's also like a really big part just being a therapist. And that's both for the clients that we get to work with directly and the communities that they serve. And we're working on getting better at this even, is creating that space to process some of the big changes that people have been through. That we can talk about strategy and decisions and allocations all day, but if we're not addressing the underlying, essentially emotional trauma that both communities and social sector leaders have endured, then we'll get to the end and it just won't really stick, or we will have missed something, or clients and communities won't trust us. We've got to allow people to process everything they've been through before we can honestly give people the space to dream again, to give them the optimism, the hope, the possibility that they used to have when they started this work. Like we've got to just create emotional space and ask questions and affirm before we can start to get to the next place. That's something that I'm still learning, and I think is a super fun part of the job, but I don't know that I knew that's what we were going to be doing.
No, that's definitely a fun part of it. I think one of the things that has surprised me is how long organizations sit in some pretty big tensions. It's, sometimes I thought, folks only call us when, we need to something new is happening or they're ready for a new strategy or new pivot. But it has been pretty interesting to see a step in to see the history of how long there's just been these issues staring leaders in the face, and they just, because of different trauma and different relationships and different influences, just haven't been able to make a decision, or have the trust to make a decision to go left or go right. And so that's been pretty eye-opening, stepping into, like, it's kind of like when they talk about being healthy, like get checked early, and that's the best sort of solution, is like address something right on its onset. And I've been really surprised that there's some organizations who have been aware of a thing, but they just haven't been able to tackle it. And so that brings with it a lot of emotional ties and things that we have to navigate when we step, and mindsets that we have to navigate when we step into the work. And it's brought a different element, right, to what you have to work through before you can even talk about goals or KPIs. There's lots of layers between starting and getting there.
And like normalizing tension, right? Like,
yeah,
every organization has tension. Let's put it out there. Let's like actually name it so we can talk about it. Yeah. It's not bad. You don't have to avoid it. Like,
no,
let's actually normalize it and put it front and center.
I think we need way more of that in the social sector. Like, my friends who work in like the for-profit space, like, their team meetings, they can get a little, they go at each other a little bit, but that disagreement and that, again, when done in a respectful way, actually can create some really incredible solutions, because we're all trying to prove a point, and in it, there's probably a little bit in everybody's perspective, but we've seen organizations kind of shy away from that disagreement. But we need it. We need to have it, and we need to be able to work through it together and not avoid it. Let's put it on the table and figure out where to go, from here.
I've worked inside different organizations in Dallas where I think really well-intentioned either community engagement or staff engagement has created fractures because maybe they asked questions without setting up some boundaries. And I'm really interested in your model of the fixed, flexible engagement. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like and why it's beneficial for your clients?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's one of the challenges that create those fractures is the history of, like, I share, nothing happens. Why do I even talk?
Yep.
And so, but the reason I think some organizations do that is they think it's a blank canvas when it's really not. And so,
or they think it's better.
Or think it's better to be a blank canvas. Like, we want to hear it. And it's like, no, if you truly, not do you want to hear what everybody has to say? The question is, can you act on the things that everybody says? And if the answer is, no, well, we can't act on what everybody's saying, then we can't go out there and just have some blank canvas. And I think that is where some of those fractures come, is people don't understand the difference of, right, yes, you want to hear those things making you act. So when we talk about fixed flexible, we're saying there are some things that there are stakeholders who, for whatever reason, governance purposes, organizational structure, they're going to be charged with making these types of decisions. Those are decision points we don't need to have a staff meeting about. We don't need to take to the community. We can explain and talk to the community about these things. We owe the community, we owe staff our rationale, help them understand our thinking, let them know how to share their feedback with us on if something isn't working. But there are some things that cannot ideate around with everyone. But there are many things where, yes, there is an incredible chance here to hear different perspectives. Those are the decisions, those are the conversations we want to take out. And that's what we try to guide clients on at the very beginning is, what are the fixed things that certain folks can weigh in on? Let's make a plan around, again, not just keeping them in-house, but let's make a plan how we want to communicate these. Then let's go out and actually have dialogue with stuff we can actually, I like to say, like, show receipts for. That we made this decision because we heard staff say A, B, and C. We want to be able to show receipts for the engagement that we do, and that helps build trust. And that trust goes, like, a very far away.
And I think organizations need to know, if nothing is on the flexible list, just save your time and energy. Like, you don't need to talk to your staff. You don't need to talk to your people. Do what you think needs to be done.
Right.
Like, really, like, don't go engage anybody if you're not willing to act on it. And if it's one thing, then great, engage around that, because then you can do something with it. But if you really aren't willing to or can't for whatever reason, then just skip that step. Yeah. Just move forward with your plan.
For sure.
We learned it the hard way.
Like, for sure. We did.
Sky, blank canvas.
I was all about blank canvas, and I was all about everybody needs to weigh in on everything. And I think, so again, that we didn't come up with that out the gate. That wasn't our value or principle. We had to kind of get our teeth knocked in a little bit when we would go in community and, we'd get to the end of the project or come back a year later for another project. And first of all, what happened to the last thing, we were talking about doing? Oh, they never...
Well, we couldn't do that.
We couldn't do it. And we could have probably known that going in. And the engage is not, the performative is just not a checkbox. Like, if we do it that way, it has way more risk associated with just doing it to say we did it than actually not doing it at all.
Right.
Like, and I think that's a misconception is, if we don't engage the community, then people are going to think X, Y, and Z of us. No, if you engage the community and don't act on what they say, that's actually rigorous. So just don't do it if you don't think, you can actually respond or make some changes based on what you're hearing.
I think a lot of people enter the social impact space as optimists and over time probably become pragmatists. But I am struck by how many goals that org set feel really incremental. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, do we need to stay in that incremental space, or do you see orgs that have opportunities for bigger impact, who are maybe taking a safer path or not swinging for the fences because the expectation isn't there? Like, the expectation is play it safe and go incremental.
I think you got to go upstream a little bit from there, because I think until philanthropy welcomes risk and failing forward more, welcome learning more.
Incremental change is what's rewarded.
Incremental change is what's rewarded, because we can say we hit our metrics, so please fund us again.
Yeah.
Until there is a really truly a seismic shift in thinking about philanthropy as like venture capital.
Yeah, right? It's R&D. We need
research and development. Mm-hmm. We're going to continue to see these safer bets because big, bold innovation compared to think about the things that have been revolutionized in the private sector. Just from saying, here's some money, go try to figure it out.
Right.
So the social sector has incredibly brilliant people in it who have chosen to do this as their life's work. We have our own, geniuses in this space, but they're not working in an ecosystem that really rewards them for taking risk. And so I think until we change the structure around some of our nonprofit, organizations to really incentivize that, we're going to continue to see that sort of incremental kind of change. And it really is one of the only sectors you see that in, right? Everything else, people are trying to knock it out of the park, and many are failing. Some are having great success, and they've got a lot of learning and data to show now what does and does not work. But we need that mindset. We're trying to solve literally our society's greatest issues. We're not just trying to get somebody to buy, more soap. That's great. That's good for your company. People get super creative for how to get that done. We're talking about hunger, we're talking about education, right? Mm-hmm. So we're literally talking life and death. So this should be the space where we are saying, like, yeah, let's swing. And if we miss, then we miss because we're already missing.
Right. And the miss isn't, you're still learning. Like, if we learn what doesn't work, that's just as valuable as learning what does. And sometimes you're going to learn what doesn't. Sometimes you're going to learn what does, but they got to have the space, the freedom, the flexibility, resourcing to learn and to have whatever those learnings are be considered valuable.
And to your kind of the conversation we were having earlier about like the distribution of resources, we got to position the right type of organizations that take those risks, right? Like the ones who are, not getting the next $1 million might mean everybody gets fired. Those are actually the orgs closer to the ground that actually need to be practicing innovative things. And so we actually have to make sure, even if we create that ecosystem where it's like everybody is able to take risks, not just, the folks who have the financial safety net or have the best relationships with their funders. Like, the folks closest to the ground have to be in a position to innovate and try, or else, again, we'll never get there.
I think the other factor that's rewarded in philanthropy that can inversely impact the changes you're able to make is scale. A lot of times, organizations feel like we just have to scale, and that's what's rewarded. But that can have an inverse connection to your impact. And if they could stay smaller, they could maybe actually make transformative changes for a smaller group of people if they didn't feel the constant pressure to grow and spread.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Mighty Good. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Follow us wherever you find your podcasts or on YouTube.